Thanks for coming to see this. I'm Doug. I'm colorblind. Specifically, I have severe deuteranopia. I'll be explaining what exactly that means a little later on. A quick show of hands. Is anyone in here colorblind? Right. So a couple of individuals. Yeah, that's about right. Cool. So you'll be glad to know this presentation is pretty much all about pictures. So trying to just show so you can see exactly what I can see and really understand this quite strange abstract problem. So I'll launch straight into it. So who am I first off? So I was a QA tester to start with in the industry at Microsoft. Now I'm an associate development manager on Creative Assembly's console team. So Creative Assembly, we're famous for the Total War series. Also Alien Isolation was one of my first projects there. Then Halo Wars 2, and now our unannounced IP. And so, yeah, severe deuteranopia, already covered. So a quick brief of what I'm doing in this talk is going into what exactly is colorblindness, really clearing it up, doing a bit of myth busting and stuff. Let's see if I can make use of this. Nope. Okay. Never mind. I'll just do that. Cool. And then covering the kind of issues that we tend to have, various colorblind people and different types. Also, some of the things that, although as a colorblind developer, the problems I had still getting Halo Wars 2 to be colorblind friendly, and some of the things that lie in the way of that on all projects, and yeah, why it's difficult to develop for. And also as many solutions and takeaways that you can all use in your own games and pass on to your own teams and other developers as possible. So first off, what exactly is colorblindness? And I've put several of the translations for it because it's known as Daltonism in many languages after Jonathan Dalton, who was one of the first scientists to kind of discover and promote the awareness of colorblindness. So the simplest definition is the inability or decreased ability to distinguish certain colors. So before we talk about colorblindness, what is normal color sight? So how we normally see color is you have two types of photoreceptor cells in your eyes. So the first one is rods. These see black and white light and are used in low level. This is like your night vision photo cells. And it's also why when light is low, colors are harder to see because your rods cannot detect color. Whereas your cones, which can only detect intense light, they do detect color. And you have three types of them. There is red, there is blue, and there is green. So there are really four types of cells you've got. You've got your rods, and you've got your three cones. And if you have all of those cells, if you're lucky enough, you have trichromacy. This is normal vision. Now let's talk about when you don't have those. So the most common types of colorblindness are deuteranomaly, protanomaly, and tritonomaly. So these are all where one of the types of cone is defective. You still have the cone, they're just not very good. And so you can see some reduced pigmentation in some of those. These are also known as anomalous trichromacy. So you have all the cones, but there are faults with them. And then we also have deuteranopia, protanopia, and tritanopia, which are dichromacy. This is where the cones are gone. Right, again, I have deuteranopia, so I believe it's my green cones don't exist. Like, it's still quite an abstract thing to talk about. So many of the pictures I'll be showing you, I can't actually see the difference. So that trichromacy thing and that deuteranopia thing kind of look the same to me. I needed a lot of help checking this. One more condition related to color I can't leave aside is achromatopsia. It is rare. There's only about 1 in 30,000 people that suffer from it, although there is this one island in Micronesia called Pingalap where 10% of the population suffer from this. And there is I think, a fairly famous journal or book about this called The Island of the Colorblind, which is worth checking out because it really had an impact on their culture and the value of color. So I'm going to go into a little detail primarily in the dichromacy, because if you cater for dichromacy, you cater for anomalous trichromacy, because they are the same color problems, just at different intensities. So first off, deuteranopia, and this is most colorblind people. It is one of the red-green color blindness types, and this is 75% of all colorblind individuals have either deuteranopia or deuteranomaly. And this is characterized by reduced sensitivity to green light. So they sometimes call it green blind. And what they tend to confuse, not exclusively, so reds, greens, and browns will often look similar. Blue, greens, and grays will often look similar. Like when I was in secondary school, it was 3 years before I found out that my gray jumper was green. And also light greens and yellows. So I discovered lime green on a Game Boy, because I thought I had a yellow Game Boy Advance for the longest time, and then one day I noticed it had the words lime green embossed on the battery case. And also reds, oranges, and yellows. Now, reds is going to come up a lot in this talk, like for pretty much all the different types of color blindness, because it's such a key language color for us in our culture, and it's also the most commonly problematic. Oh, also, yeah, blues, purples, and dark pinks. So, moving on to protanopia. Also fairly common, and it's the other type of red-green color blindness. This is the red blindness, and it affects roughly 25% of colorblind males. And yeah, so as well as confusing many of the similar colors, so they also lose the intensity of it a lot. So red itself can look very, very dim. And so red lights can effectively look like no lights at all. So this can be, it's rarer, but it's quite impactful. There is also tritanopia. This is much more rare. It's only around 1 in 10,000 people, roughly. And it also affects men and women equally. So you often hear that it's mostly men who are colorblind. I'll go into the genetics of this in just a second, but tritanopia is even in its rarity because of the chromosome setup. And this one has reduced sensitivity to blue and yellow light. So sometimes they call it blue blind or blue and yellow blind. And the sufferers often confuse blues, greens, and grays, dark purples with black, and oranges with red. So let's a little bit more science before I start talking practicality. So what causes color blindness? It is usually hereditary, usually. In the case of deuteranopia and protanopia, it is exclusively hereditary. Now, these are caused by a defective gene on the X chromosome. The X chromosome is one of the sex chromosomes. And so if women have 2 X chromosomes, as you can see, and men only have 1. So women, if there is a defect on one of their X chromosomes, their other one can compensate. Whereas if a man has the defect on his gene, there is no compensation. Like, he's stuck with it. He's colorblind. Deal. It also means that many women are carriers and can often pass it down to their sons. Men cannot pass it to their sons because they pass on a Y chromosome. For a woman to become colorblind, both her parents must her father must be colorblind and her mother must be at least a carrier. And so they need the same defect to come down. Now, tritanopia is slightly different. Tritanopia is on chromosome 7. It is not a sex chromosome, and so it is even across both genders. But as said, it is still rare. However, it can be triggered by other means in the ways that others can't. So there are certain illnesses. You can take, sometimes brain trauma has been known to cause tritanopia or head trauma. There are medications. And to a subtle extent, old age. So, in older population, people have noticed reduced sensitivity to blue and yellow light, which is akin to tritanopia symptoms. So, just a little bit more on where you find it. So, it is roughly 1 in 12 men are colorblind, about 8% of the male population, and only 0.5% of women. So, 1 in 200. And this also changes, because it's genetic, across different regions of the world. So Caucasian populations can have it up to around 10 or 11% in Scandinavian men, but only down to 5% in Asians, roughly, and 4% of Africans. Okay, so that's the science. Now, some practical things of how does this affect life? So I've only realized some of these problems as I go through life, because it can be the longest time before I realize there was even anything wrong. So for example, not being able to tell the difference between raw meat and cooked meat is really frustrating. Also, ripe fruit. I can't actually really see, like green and yellow bananas look very similar. Any lights on routers or like systems or like phones and things like that can often be the same. When I got my new phone, this one here, I was hanging up calls for ages without realizing, because I was pressing what I thought was the green button, the one on the right, and it was driving me insane until I realized I'm pressing the wrong button. Also, fashion is basically a write-off. I kind of need help, but thankfully they do help by writing the labels and colors on clothes, but I still don't know what looks good with what, and I have no idea what mauve is. Like, nor do I know what you've done with your hair. Sorry, hair colors are very well hidden. So like I won't see highlights. Like purple hair will look blue to me. Redheads look a lot less red, and ginger is a lot less striking than I think it must be to everybody else. And if that is embarrassing for anyone, I won't notice that either, because I can't see blushing. I only realized about 2 years ago that blushing is real. I thought it was just in cartoons. And it's really annoying to realize there's this whole social cue that I've been missing all my life. This is one I added on the day before I did the talk at Develop, because it conveniently came up that lots and lots of people, protonopes and deuteranopes, were struggling to see players against the pitch. So this is showing I believe it's a deuteranopia. Yes, this is the deuteranopia picture. Those two pictures look pretty much identical to me. But what's interesting is I would struggle to see the player on the left against the pitch, whereas a protonope I might actually struggle to see the player on the right. So same problem location, but in a slightly different way. Something else I've never seen in my life is this, and not only because I don't wear that shirt today. So I've never seen that image of myself. I identify as this, because that's what I've grown up looking at. And this is what colorblind people will generally have to identify as. Oh, also this is what all of you look like. I've been told, I show people the filters and people are like, we're all green. We all look sick. And you look kind of normal. I can't tell when you are sick, though. There was someone whose blood was draining out of the face in front of me, in front of me, and I had no idea until someone else walked in the room and said, oh my God, he looks like a ghost. I'm getting the nurse. So a couple of bits of myth busting. Oh, actually, there was a good one from yesterday. The crosswalk traffic lights just outside. So about half the ones in Paris, the green is almost identical to the red. So looking opposite the roads, it's the first time I've ever been to a city where I couldn't tell the difference between the green man and the red man. It's kind of alarming. So on the subject of roads, actually. So can I drive? So at least in the UK, in most countries, the lights are set up fairly clever, fairly well, fairly intuitive. So that's with my filter on, that's how I see them. I can still tell the difference. At night, the red and yellow lights will often look the same, but the patterns do the job. So if I can see one light that is not green, it means slow down and stop. If I can see a flashing light or a green light, it means I can go. So yeah, I'm good. Although, doing some research, there are some countries which, I think Romania, controversially have restrictions on driving licenses for the colorblind. And Australia in the past has had, I couldn't find out whether it's still the case, but they did have a restriction on protonopia specifically from having a driver's license because it affects their ability to see a red light at distance. So a couple more, as popularized by the film Little Miss Sunshine, can colorblind people be pilots? And that question is a concrete maybe. So this is one where if you want to be a pilot, it's get tested because the severity of your colorblindness is what defines it. They will be able to tell you, you can see our signals well enough. Right, this is my favorite slide. Who recognizes this? Yes, this is that dress. Okay, let's actually do the vote. Okay, who can see? Who can see black and gold? Or am I mixing up the two? Who can see? I think it's actually. What was it? Was it white and gold? Yeah. So white and gold. And the rest of you? Blue and black. Right. So it's about 50-50 in the room. Like, for me, it's kind of the same. Like it. But when this happened, this was the best week ever, because it's like the rest of the world was colorblind and couldn't deal with it. But it's it's quite an interesting reason as to why you saw it that way, because it's about your internal correction of whether you think it's an indoor or an outdoor lighting scenario. And so I think if it's indoor, you see it one way. If you think it's outdoor, your brain perceives it another way. It's really an interesting one. Right, now why we're all here, video games. So, yeah, that was my favorite, terrible bit of paint work. So there are lots of different ways color blindness affects games. Like, this isn't an exhaustive list, but common issues are team colors, blending UI, characters, and environment, and distinguishing them. Also any puzzles where you're matching colors, and UI information in general. So team colors, for example. This is from, I think it was Battlefield 3. And I was a big Battlefield fan. I really enjoyed Battlefield, and I was really excited for Battlefield 3. And then I found out I couldn't see whether who was my friend and my enemies. And you can start to figure it out a bit by context, but those 12-year-olds are just too quick with their sniper rifles. You don't have time to think. And so this became a game like that, a franchise that I used to love, and now it was a franchise I could not play. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me, because I just had to lose it. And they do support color blindness now, but it was kind of 9 months too late for me when they brought it in Battlefield 3, because I lost the hype. So there are others where there are just too many colors and they're all blending together. So in Overwatch, the red aura of the enemy characters would blend them into the environment. Like, this is before putting on colorblind modes. And it would sort of camouflage the enemies and blur them into each other as well. So because Overwatch has very colorful skins, like the specific hues that denote team colors don't stand out enough. And the game is so fast, like, it's so hard to keep up. And of course, like, puzzles, quite straightforward one. Like, and you need to match the red to the orange. Which one's the red and the orange? Or similar. Like, I can only see how many colors can I see in that? About 5 maybe. But like blues, purples, it all starts to blend together. This is a very common one. And the red and green color blindnesses have a lot of the very similar problems, just as I said, from a different thing. So, like, some of us will see all the reds and greens as green, some of us will see all the reds and greens as red. And even tritonopes, to a similar stage, they all have problems in very similar areas, just a slightly different experience. So you rarely have to, as long as you're actually consulting, you rarely have to think, how do I deal with this for protanopia? How do I deal with this for deuteranopia? Like, the same problems are where you need to focus, generally. Like, similarly, we are constantly creating new ways for our UI to give information. So the top is from MechWarrior, and the different color segments show different kind of areas of health of the mech. But it is very hard. I can't intuitively tell, like, which of the areas are suffering well, especially at times where there's only one color on the screen. I don't know, is it all red or is it all green? Very hard to tell. The next one from Fable 3, like a color matching one. I think that's the pancake or the pie making game. And then a Materia in Final Fantasy VII. Like, I didn't even realize there were categories. Like, the color's just kind of a bit of a mess for me. Right, and into a game that I worked on myself. And so I'll talk about some of the... So there were some problems in this game. We shipped it with a few problems to do with color blindness, and they weren't always ones I could really do something about. And I'll go into why soon. So the bits I'm focusing on where we had some trouble, so team colors. Our mini-map had some trouble. There was a bit of a problem in the campaign colors, and we had blitz cards. So they were like cards you would play to deploy units. And there was some specific card information that I couldn't actually make use of. So let's cover these. I'll cover these quickly, because I probably don't have long. I don't have any kind of clock here. Oh my. So the team colors were really difficult to pick. Like, I mean, one of our character artists tried, but having 6 distinguishable colors and then having 3 still intuitively aligned in one color blank is really hard. So when it's in isolation, the central tank, I don't know if it's a green tank or a red tank, and the ones on the outside reaches look just the same to me. And so in a game where there's like 100 tanks on screen, I just can't make sense of which units are mine. And the mini-map was, there was so much information on here, and the dark blue background, the light blue, and white UI elements would all fade into each other. And so I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And the top central, like the green, I'm still seeing blue elements of it as well. So it was just too confusing. Right, here's a little game. Your base is under attack. There are 2 red units on that mini-map. Where are they? Right. They're there. Right. And that was our campaign color. That was the decision, like, of where it was. And it was a long time into the development before I actually realized and was able to make sense of, oh, these are different. Like, they're supposed to be different. I actually just thought the enemies were hidden on the map. And we had some cards as well. So is this good against infantry, vehicles, or aircraft? And it looks like it's kind of neutral against infantry and vehicles. Maybe not. Right. And this is one, again, like until you can actually call out what the feature is and what it's supposed to do, you can't correct it. And I think one more of the Halo Wars issues. So yeah, it was such a busy game, such a complex game. And like I had no idea the red units had the auras that they do. Like, so someone could play this game. It was a busy game anyway. I've been told by people that aren't colorblind, like it was still very busy, but I just had no idea. I just had to press all units and count, like, to know if anything of mine was still alive. So, but I'm colorblind. I'm on the team. Like, I know, why can't I help solve all these problems? So there's quite a simple reason for that. So obviously, the problem is invisible to normal-sighted developers. Say, I can't see that. And you get the program response. Well, it works on my machine. No, most of them never really said that, but I quite like the joke. But there's another problem. The features are invisible to me. And so I can't comment on features if I don't know they exist. And so who starts the conversation? So I can give you some examples. So in Alien Isolation, a couple of us were talking earlier. So I was a QA testing, and I was testing the androids, the working Joes. And it was really annoying, because after a while I would realize I don't know which ones of these are aggressive and which ones I need to hide from. God, it would be so nice if there was a way to tell. Like just only someone, oh. And yep, apparently their eyes would glow red when they were aggressive. But I didn't know this feature existed. I didn't find out until we were pretty much shipping the game, and by which time it was too late to actually comment on it. In fact, I spoke to one of our other colorblind staff, a programmer who worked on the game for years, and they're like, this is about 2 years after Alien Isolation shipped, and his response was, wait, they do? Like, he didn't know either. Similarly, in Star Wars, I didn't know that racing lines, which, and they kind of go for red, orange, green, yellow for braking zones and that, I didn't know they change color. I just thought they were a yellow line until I got a test case as a QA saying, can you check that it changes in the braking zones? And I was like, it does what? So I raised this saying, hey, can we change this? Because it doesn't really work. And the response I got was, well, that's how Forza and everyone else does it. They do? Yeah. So I'm pleased to say I was playing the new Forza Horizon a few days ago, and the racing line, like just from launch, and it goes from red to blues. I was like, I can see. I know when to brake. It's fantastic. Cool. So how do we get around this? So there's lots of different elements to the layers of solving the colorblindness problem, and this room is probably the most educated in this manner I expect I'll ever speak to. But I'll probably cover some ground that you already know fairly well. So there are known palettes which can be chosen from to assist colorblind people and make it clear to different types of colorblindness. This is particularly helpful when setting up a colorblind mode. And there are lots of resources available online. I'm happy to give these slides to anyone that wants them, if they want to chase down links or look over things again. And this is a good standard practice to even initially design your game. So you might not even need a colorblind mode. You can think, right, I can make these clear and in simple ways. It doesn't cover everything, and you'll always need to consult. If in doubt, you can use blue and orange if you only need to distinguish two key things in your game, because these can be seen by all of the three brands of colorblindness. So all the deuteranopes, triteranopes, and protanopes can make this distinction. Possibly not with achromatopsia. It depends on, and it depends on if one of them is particularly bright or dark. In that case, it's where you can start using shapes. A key element for developers is actually knowing what are your color features, because if you ask most developers, they haven't thought enough. They haven't thought, this is a color feature, this is a color feature. And so there are so many things it can be. It can be your puzzles, your maps, the infamous red X of Sea of Thieves, UI elements, your team colors, different item colors, different lights, like from Freelancer. I didn't know there were up and green and red lights for the up and down lanes. That got me killed so many times. And also text even. So I know we have, these are pretty clear, these and the blues and reds, but you have to check especially if you've got multiple different options. So for example, in this case, that might not be that clear to a tritanope that the is that a new suit is different, is a paragon option. And also if you've got a complex color palette, it can even obscure all the good work you're doing and make it hard for everyone to see the game. Something to help your developers as you go is using presets. So early on, setting up pipelines where your key parts of information, so like your allies, your neutrals, interactives, have them as an assignable parameter rather than relying on artists to bake them into textures and things like that. And so figure out the categories you need. You can set up all the presets and you can use the palettes like I was showing before to make these usable. Test them, always test them. And then this frees up your artists and designers, because some of them, they can't always think about it every single time. And the more freedom you can give them to work with it, kind of safely knowing that it's going to be transmitted properly, the better for them. And yeah, so you want this to be a systematic handling. And there are also plenty of simulator tools out there. So Color Oracle is a free simulator software you can just have covering your whole screen. And then there's a lot built into packages. So Unity has a colorblind package. Unreal Engine has a color deficiency preview, and is now also getting the infrastructure in the 4.20 upgrade that they use in Fortnite. So everyone should be able to, anyone developing an Unreal from there should be able to make use of that infrastructure. Photoshop also has a colorblind simulator, many of you probably seen. And there was also a Sim Daltonism, which is a real-time simulation on the computer of how it is to have them all. I think it's fairly similar to Color Oracle. Chrome has plugins as well. There are loads, and that one is the one I have been using to make the pictures you have seen. It's a really simple browser window. You can just drag a picture into it, and you can choose browse the different types of color blindness and see how it looks there. So there's lots of ways to tell. Of all the takeaways, I actually think this is the biggest one. And this is kind of along the lines of some of what Mark was saying earlier. Keep talking to people. Always just keep talking to people about. And this is working. The more I've given this talk internally, I've given it to develop, and since then, both internal and external people are talking to me about the features they're making, and checking with me that and does this work? And how would this work for you? What do you think? And I pretty much never meet people that don't want to help. I only meet people that don't know how or don't understand what the problem is, which is great. It's fantastic. And so that's all it takes. And here's a few examples of color solutions. Sorry. So here are some games that have done it well. So Hue is one that came out, I think, earlier this year, and it's entirely color-based. And of course, quite difficult for me to play, but it launched with a colorblind mode. They knew exactly what they were doing. And then they uses logos to define all the things. It's completely readable, which is fantastic. And this is about identifying the feature, consulting, and figuring out how to cater for it. Similarly, Left 4 Dead 2, they have player auras. So there is an enemy on top of a friendly there. I can't tell where one ends and the other begins. But they launched with a colorblind mode. They knew this was going to be a problem. And so I can see just as well as you can. I switched the colorblind mode on as soon as I got the game, and I never had the problem. It was actually in Left 4 Dead 1 as well. I just prefer the shots from Left 4 Dead 2. And FTL, another one. There's so much color information, which is easy to lose about the statuses of different things. And it's totally, it's all on this red-green aura, so affecting all of the different types. But they knew as well. They knew these were going to be problems. So they have a mode where I can see everything. I switched it on. I found it at the beginning, and I played the hell out of that game. It was great. And I'm also quite pleased to say at Creative Assembly we're on top of this as well. So Total War Warhammer 2 was our first title that launched with colorblind modes straight away, which I was so pleased to see. And I think may even be a little result of my nagging a few years ago. But I'm just so glad people are chipping in, and an example of what it helps achieve. So Total War is a busy battlefield with lots of different color elements. And initially, it can be very hard to tell where everything is. It's all mashed together. But bringing in the colorblind mode, I can see so clearly who's friendly, who is an enemy, and it's fantastic. And similarly, they actually had text problems. This is another one I raised. So I couldn't tell on quick look whether my troops had a positive or neutral or negative status effects on them at the time. But then the colorblind mode brings it in clear as day. It makes these games playable. It's fantastic. And of course, so Overwatch is an interesting one where they brought in, they have colorblind modes to support the different things. So you could actually switch between all the three types, but they weren't quite there. So they didn't quite help because they made some decisions on the colors that they just weren't right. It clearly wasn't tested and consulted enough because the enemy and friendly UI colors the characters were easier to see against the environment, but the enemy-friendly UI colors became really close together. And so it's still hard to actually tell who to shoot. In fact, it actually led me when I was playing to pick a couple of particular characters, mostly Anna and Orisa. Anna, it doesn't matter who you shoot because it either hurts them or heals them. And Orisa has that handy secondary ability that pulls all enemies into a space. And although it's supposed to be a tactical thing, I was just using it to find out who my enemies were. So there are often workarounds. There's a streamer called Colour-Blind, with a K, Colour-Blind, who actually has some really good rants on Overwatch. And she's got some good reaction videos recently of the updates to the Colour-Blind UI, which I'll show you in a moment. So we were talking, I think both Chris and Mark were discussing the idea of giving players control. And this is huge. It really works in colorblind modes as well. So audio surf, you have to match 5 colors at high speed, which is so hard to get right and make work for different colorblind modes. So don't. Give them the ability to choose all 5 of the color modes, and they can make the game playable for themselves. It's great. Similar, even all the way back in Worms, the fact that we could choose team colors. Back then, before they often tended to be assigned as a standard, us being able to choose them made it really, they'd always let me choose first. Can I have that really light blue one because I can see it? And similar in Command & Conquer, they had them. And there have been some great updates recently. So firstly, to Overwatch, they've brought this in where you can now, between enemy and friendly, you can choose the colors that work for you. They're almost there. There's a couple of bugs in it where different elements don't transmit the right color. Yeah, it's just a little buggy. And you can't choose group color yet. But they're on the right track. I'm sure there's a couple of people at Blizzard saying, oh, we're so close. And there was a screenshot of the Battlefield 1 colorblind modes earlier, which have also, although already fairly good, become vastly upgraded. So this is about as good as it can get, I think, like, because it's giving you team, enemy, neutral color for things, and you have a hue graph. Like, you can choose anything. And this actually gives power to achromatopsia sufferers as well, because they can choose like just different intensity levels just to find a way to make it so that they can see it. It gives them the control to solve their own problem. That's immensely empowering. And there's also something really interesting that Fortnite do. That I think I'm nearly there. I think I might run over a bit. So Fortnite, their colorblind mode actually has a bunch of Ishihara plates to start with. Now, a lot of people don't actually know that much about their colorblindness, or they might not have been diagnosed. And they probably don't know which type. The streamers I've seen, in a kind of adorable way, cannot pronounce the names of the colorblindness types. But they can use this to just figure out a way to make them see better. They don't have to understand their condition. They just can change the sliders until all the llamas are clear. So this is this is the reason I call this accessible accessibility. You don't have to kind of study to be able to solve your own problem. It just says, make this work for yourself. But Chris mentioned in his talk, he was wondering who these people were using all the colorblind modes, but who don't identify as colorblind. And, well, I think I know who they are. So when researching colorblindness in Fortnite, it's a lot of people just saying, hey, here are the best colorblind settings to actually get an advantage in the game. And so this really highlights the people that they just want a clear game. They want a clear experience that they can play well. And now them having control means they can make that experience work for themselves as well. And we can learn a lot from these people that are using the settings that don't actually need it. They're teaching us more about how we can make our games clearer. And it's clearly what they want. So one of the last options is you want a game that's crazy color. You want it off the wall in terms of colors. But you can give your characters customization. You can give them control of shape. So in Gang Beasts, I can always make sure, well, I don't know what color I am, but I'm the dinosaur. So that's how I can find myself. Or in Star Wars, you can say, well, I'm the one with a snail riding on my back. And it gives you silhouette control instead of color. So it's another way to get the job done. And those are the main ones. So just to recap quickly. So for someone wanting to make a game that's color accessible, so understand your palette, identify your color features, use any available preview tools, use a color preset system, especially on a larger team, and make a solution that works for your game. And then test it. Test it and consult. You've probably got players, friends, colleagues, and then there are consultants you can find as well. And also make them accessible. So although AudioSurf had a really good feature, I didn't actually find it on the front. So I'm glad to see Fortnite has an accessibility tab. More games I'm seeing are having accessibility options right accessible from the root menu, which is perfect. And keep talking to the community, keep asking for feedback, because they are the ones that have the problems and can tell you, because especially if your color vision is fine, this problem is invisible to you. And the last one is, of course, thank you for anyone that is trying to make this work. It is, a lot of people have said this, but I know whenever someone is putting that effort in for us, this isn't something that they suffer from, and it doesn't help them, but it can change a game for me, and I love games, and we all want to play them. And so on that note, thank you very much.